So I see that the root of the power of Hanukkah and the energy of Joseph are very closely linked and very closely similar. So I think it's no coincidence that during this period of time in which we celebrate Hanukkah, we read the stories, we read the different Torah portions related to Joseph. What do I mean by that? So let me start off with a question about Hanukkah for the modern mind, right? I mean, so Hanukkah is a celebration in which we read in the prayer book that it's a time to praise God. That's primarily really what Hanukkah is about, and the lighting the candles is a way of is publicizing the miracle that occurred. So in the Amidah, in the standing prayer, there is an insertion that we put in there during Hanukkah. And it's very beautiful. Maybe I should read the whole thing to you. So it's in the Thanksgiving section towards the end of the standing prayer. And we say, and for the miracles and for the salvation and the mighty deeds and the victories and the wonders, and some add for the consolations and battles which you performed for our forefathers in those days at this time. Then it says, in the days of Matisyahu, the son of Yochanan, the high priest, the Hashmonean, and his sons, when the wicked Greek kingdom rose up against your people Israel to make them forget your Torah and compel them to stray from the statutes of your will, you in your great mercy stood up for them in the time of their distress. You took up their grievance, judged their claim, and avenged their wrong. You delivered the strong into the hands of the weak, the many into the hands of the few, the impure into the hands of the pure, the wicked into the hands of the righteous, and the wanton into the hands of the diligent, or you could say the malicious into the hands of the diligent students of Torah. For yourself you made a great and holy name in your world, and for your people Israel you worked a great victory and salvation at this very day. Thereafter, your children came to the Holy of Holies of your house, cleansed your temple, purified the sight of your holiness, and kindled lights in the courtyards of your sanctuary. And they established these 8 days of Hanukkah to express thanks and to praise your great name. So there it is. The purpose of Hanukkah is to express thanks and to praise the great name of God. May he be blessed. So, okay, so let's think about this. So, what happened on Hanukkah that we are praising God for? That we're giving such thanks and we're making such a big deal about. And that it's mentioned in the prayers. We light the candles. The Jewish people, make festivities. What happened, right? So, first of all, as it says here, there was a conflict. And the Jews and the Judeans, the Jews, your nation Israel, right? And the priests, the Hashmonean, they defeated the Greeks. That was a battle. Many people died. And in the end, but still, the Jewish people succeeded against all odds. As it says here, there were many against few. So for a few thousand, there were tens and tens of thousands of Greek soldiers, right? And, they were seasoned and so on and so forth. But look, at the end of the day, it was a battle. It wasn't an open miracle like the going out of Egypt. It was kind of a hidden miracle. I mean, they won, but let's just say this happened today. What would they say? They'd say it was a guerrilla war. They had some good tactics. The supply lines of the Greeks ran low. I mean, we find a lot of reasons to explain it. But our sages were not satisfied with such answers, and the Jews of that period saw it as a miracle, and they thank God for it, right? Now, the second miracle, which is not mentioned here, is the miracle of the lamp, the miracle of the oil. It mentions that they lit candles in the courtyards of the temple, but it doesn't say that there was a miracle related to it. But let's just think about that for a second. So, as it states in some of the Mishnaic literature, not in the Mishnah, but it's called a Braita, discusses the miracle. It recounts. It's one of the few sources that recounts the miracle of the oil. Miracle of the oil, in which the Maccabees, when they finally reclaimed the temple and it was desecrated, it was full of idols, and everything was made impure, and it was desecrated in terrible ways. Besides non-kosher food, and I think there was even prostitutes brought into the temple. So it was a terrible desecration of God's name. And they were looking around for oil to rekindle the menorah, the candelabrum in the temple, and they couldn't find any pure oil. They wanted it to be pure oil. Finally, they found one flask, which was only enough for one day. Each flask has just enough for that day's ritual, and it lit for 8 days instead of one. Give enough time to them to press new oil and to have new oil for the... Okay, so this is a unique miracle. But again, looking at it I'm afraid to say that from our modern perspective, I don't know if we would have established a holiday for generations based on this miracle. No one became a millionaire. The candles were lit in the temple for 8 days, and then it burned out and they had new oil. But, you see so much about their perspective. But they were so happy that God showed his love, that they were trying to do this mitzvah, this commandment properly. And they searched and searched and searched. They wanted to do it the right way with pure oil. And they found it, and they didn't have enough. But you know what? They trusted in God. They lit it, and whatever happens, happens. And it lit for 8 days to give them an opportunity to do the mitzvah the right way, with pure oil, with oil that was untouched by ritual impurities. So, and for this, they established a holiday or commemorated this for generations. So I think this gives us a very, very, it's at least, I think it's something very fundamental in Judaism, but I think Hanukkah gives us a very, very good example of the way the Jewish sages looked at life, and looked at occurrences. And we never look at something as it just happens and it's not important. We start from the point of view of this is a miracle, that this is done by God. This is not our wisdom or our strength. And number two, looking at the positive, the glass half full. I'll give you really a classic example of this, and that is that the last blessing of grace after meals is a rabbinic blessing. And in Hebrew it's called Hatov HaMeitiv, which means that he is good and he does good, in simple English. That's what it means. So the question is, when did they establish this blessing? And exactly what it said, what I just said, the title of the blessing is what it talks about, how good God is and how he does kindness. You know when they established this blessing? So during the Bar Kokhba revolt, these two large metropolis cities of Judea were basically exterminated. Everyone was massacred, and there were tens and tens of thousands of bodies laying out. The Romans refused to allow the defeated, Judean settlement to bury their dead. And they sat out there for a very long time. I think it may even be a year, but a very, very long time. The bodies laid out in disgrace. And finally, they gave permission to bury those bodies. And because of that, they established this blessing. So again, think about that. There was this horrendous tragedy, and tens and tens of, maybe hundreds of thousands died. And because they were given the opportunity to bury the dead, they established a blessing, talking about how God is good and gives good. I mean, I think that's very profound in that despite this terrible tragedy that happened, they were able to see the incredible good and kindness that at least all these many multitude of dead will be able to be buried honorably and according to Jewish law. And that meant so much that they established this blessing. And I think this is just so important for us and everybody. And who knows, maybe more people will listen to this podcast, or maybe they'll hear it somewhere else. But the point is that, to recognize the good in life as a gift. I mean, we've spoken about this with me in my classes many, many times. But the point is to be in a mindset of thanks, of gratitude, of starting from zero. This is usually how I describe it. But the reason why a person who's really a believer should be very happy all the time, or should be in a state of the default is happy, is because we start from zero. See, an atheist starts from taking everything from it. There's a world, and I'm alive, and there's no reason for it, but I'm here, and that's a fact. And therefore, so there's nothing as a gift here. But from a religious perspective, everything is intentional. And I'm here because there was a supreme being who wanted me here. I have sustenance because he wants me to. I exist because he wants me to exist, as does everything else around me is exactly there with the intent. And everything that I enjoy, there's a force of love that's putting it there that I should enjoy, that I can have it, that it's taking care of me. It's a totally different attitude. Your whole life, it's completely different. And we see that again and again in Jewish holidays, that particularly in the exilic holidays of Purim and Hanukkah, which were more or less hidden miracles. But we celebrate them with such great happiness, and they were hidden miracles. I mean, Purim is a political story. You could see it as a miracle, but you could also discount it as not being a miracle. This king had some crazy jealousy, and he went from one end to the other. But we see it as a miracle. We see that was the hand of God. And we celebrate that, and we tell the story as a miracle. You know what's also a miracle? It's a miracle that we see it as a miracle. This is also a miracle. The fact that the Jewish people felt the God's hand in it, and that to such an extent that they rejoiced over it, that's something unique, and it's something that is very hidden from us in this generation. I'm afraid to say it, maybe from everybody. We all struggle with this because we're born into an atheistic society, even if we're not atheists, but it's in the air. It's in the air. Everything is taken for granted. And the thing that on people's minds is, how do I face up, or how do I what's the right expression? But how do I compare it to my neighbor? How do I compare it to my friend? In other words, do I have as much as they do? Do I have as many? That's really what people are looking at, and that's a very destructive and very unhealthy. The Jewish way of looking at it is that, and although there's a complexity in this, but I have what God, specifically directed to me. It's a special package, custom made for me. This is custom made. And so it doesn't matter what someone else has, because that's for him. This is mine. And if I have certain problems, he doesn't, but that's my problems it must be for specific reasons. Either things I can figure out, sometimes I can't. But it must be for me, and if God's doing it, must be ultimately for my good. And the more a person goes through life, the more they begin to realize, they look back and they realize, I wouldn't be the person I am today if those things would have been different, things that happened to me earlier on in my life. So this is why Joseph has to do with Hanukkah, because we see Joseph, it says that he always had God's name in his mouth. He attributed everything to God. If you look in chapter 39, when Joseph was in Potiphar's house, the Pharaoh's butcher or executioner, depending on how you understand. But it says that his master saw there that God was with him. So Rashi comments that how did he know God was with him? Because he was always talking about God. In other words, he always is attributing his successes to God, not to himself. And we see the same thing in this week's reading also, that Joseph tells the brothers, I'm not here because because of your plotting or because of your actions. I'm here because God sent me here. And God sent me here for the most noble of reasons, in order to sustain whole peoples. That I should be able to be in a position to figure out how to sustain and make sure there's food to sustain a multitude of people. So he saw, in other words, instead of gloating over his own accomplishments, he attributed it to God. But he also, not only did he attribute it to God, but he also saw it as an altruistic act. In other words, he didn't say, God gave this to me. He said, I should be great because God was rewarding me. No, I am God's vehicle to help humanity. That's what Joseph said. So that's really, a tremendous lesson of how we have to look at our lives. If we succeed in life, and we're given different gifts or successes, number one, this is not mine. This is from God. It's because God gave me assistance and knowledge and talent and certain relationships, which everything is, it's not coming to me, it was given to me. Even when it seems like I'm really working, I'm able, but if God took that away from me, I couldn't. And if I don't make the right decisions or say the right things, it's not going to happen. Nothing could work out. But on top of that, also, it shouldn't just be done with understanding that God does it, but I'm doing it for my own selfish, self-interested reasons. But my accomplishments should be with the intention to help society. So there's a twofold thing. It's person sees himself as the, as the tool, so to speak, as an emissary of God, as the hand, so to speak, the how God is able to accomplish certain things in this world. Or it's said differently, he sees that his accomplishments are really God's accomplishments, that the gifts and his abilities came from God's assistance. And number two, his interest and his energies are directed towards helping others and doing God's will. So that's what we see from Joseph. And so that's why I see that Joseph he's so deeply meditated and educated, and was very deeply seeped into him this idea of faith, in that the praise doesn't go to him, but it goes to God. I see this is what Hanukkah is really all about in a deeper sense. Yes, there's the miracle of the lights, and there's other themes, but our ability to recognize those other themes comes from this talent. Be able to recognize that everything is from him. Everything is from God. And so there's two ways to look at this issue. First of all, so people hear this point, and first of all, it disturbs many people because they feel, wait a minute, I don't have any freedom. There's this supreme being who is basically, in control, and I really have nothing. It's very unsatisfying to many people. And also obviously the idea that it sounds like, what are you saying? I'm not in control of my destiny. There's another being that's in control of my destiny. So to answer these questions, there's a complexity in it, but in reality, it's so incredibly mysterious and nuanced that there's two things going on at the same time. A person has freedom, choice, and ability, but at the same time, he's also completely within God's control and assistance. It's both true at the same time. It's not something a human being can really fully comprehend. To simplify it, you could say I split it into two, as our sages do, I split it into two aspects. One is the aspects of our worldly accomplishments, and the other is related to our spiritual accomplishments. Meaning to say, our sages say, simple statement in Hebrew is Hakol bidei shamayim chutz miyiras shamayim, which means everything is in the hands of heaven besides fear of heaven. So God has given us free choice to be free moral agents. Everything else is predetermined. That's a simple thing that our sages say. Now, you can ask on this, is that it seems strange because, many people do make decisions, for example, about their work and how much effort they're putting into their work or their marriage or their health. What do you mean? Everything but religion is predetermined. So what do you mean? I can just sit back and be healthy and just sit back and eat Twinkies and I'll be healthy because God determined that? No. The thing is, as I said before, but the thing is, these things are so intertwined. In other words, the idea of fear of heaven, its province is not limited. Again, it has to do with the way we're looking at things. We're used to a kind of, how do I say, how should I say, Christian secular way of looking at things. So there's religion and there's life. But in Judaism, there is no such distinction. So everything you're doing, there's an aspect of, am I doing it right for, something that's positive that God wants me to do or not? So for example, health. Person is responsible to take care of their health. That's part of fear of heaven because that's a person's responsibility to take care of the body that God gave them. That's part of a mitzvah, so to speak. That's a good deed. That's something a person is supposed to be doing. And how they eat and how they take care of themselves, and also if they refrain from indulgences and laziness, this is all part of fear of heaven. So there's a continuous overlap between our destiny and our decisions. It's very hard to really parse through it and say what's what exactly. However, we do all know that some people are more talented in certain things. They have more knack for certain things. We can see in our lives sometimes we try something and it just goes. Certain circumstances come our way. We fall into certain different situations, whether it's in terms of the person we meet to be a spouse, just how we meet that person, or business related things. How do I become acquainted with a certain area or job or something? All these different things. You see that there's a lot of other factors besides just me and my own abilities that come to play. It's not just myself. So all those things are divinely decreed. That I happen to be, and again, you can say, what do you mean it's divine decreed? I went to this certain place and I had an interview. I did a good job and I got the job. Yeah, but the thing is that the person who interviewed you had a good day that day. And in other words, things start in terms of how you ended up, like 100 years ago. This person had this person, and this person gave birth to this person, who had this personality, people you met, and how you were feeling. There's so many factors that are going into every single event continuously, and this is all really by divine providence on every step of the way. And again, mixed together with human decisions. So it's incredibly mysterious, but we just have to know this rule, even though we can't. Really, it's very difficult to separate. The basic rule is, as in Hasidic, Chabad Hasidus like to say, that and God blesses, and the verse says that and God blesses the work of your hands that you do. I think it's in Deuteronomy, but the point is the blessing goes into you make an effort, and God blesses that effort. But you do have to make an effort. The way it's said is you have to make a vessel. You have to make the vessel and the divine blessing can rest there. But you're not really doing it because it's without the divine energy and blessing, nothing can succeed. Because outcome belongs to God. But nevertheless, you have to work, you have to put in the effort. That's part of the divine rule. Effort has to be there, particularly after the sin of Adam, right? It says that with the sweat of your brow, you will have bread. So we have to put in a lot of effort into these matters. But again, there's so much an overlap because the thing I do for a living could be something that's assisting humanity in some way, and that's partially a mitzvah. And if I do it in a way that takes advantage of people, that's a decision that I'm making, which is the opposite of a mitzvah, which is a sin. So, there's continuous overlap in our moral decision making, and between that and divine providence as to whether I succeed or I don't succeed, and so on and so forth. So, I guess I got a little bit far afield, not really, but I'm trying to bring out this idea of how kind of an awareness we have to have for being grateful and God's participation in our lives continuously, and how thankful we have to be. And the generation of the Hashmonaim, the Maccabees, they saw this, they understood this. You could say that who knew better than them? Who knew better than them? Can you think about it? Think about it. They had 5,000 men against an army of 50,000, and they said this is impossible. Impossible. Better equipped, better trained, right? With better supplies, an empire, right? And they were priests, farmers. I mean, they clearly, evidently, maybe some of them knew how to wield weapons. I don't know, but anyway, somehow they won. They won. They can't look. There are books about it. The Maccabees, or others, according to at least these accounts, there was strategy, there was a lot of sacrifice. Many people died, right? Judah Maccabee himself was killed, if I'm not mistaken, in the famous battle with the elephants. I forget where that took place exactly. But they're famously that the Seleucid, how is it called? The Seleucid Greeks, if I'm saying that correctly. They brought in elephants from India. So in other words, they brought in the tanks, okay, against infantry. That was the equivalent in those days. So anyway, much blood was shed, but still, instead of being upset and blaming God, they thanked God for the success. It's a lot to learn from. In other words, the idea is you don't owe us anything. So thank you. Another point that we see very clearly about Jewish attitudes in Hanukkah is that why are we celebrating Hanukkah? Is it a celebration of the military victory? Really? Not really. We're celebrating religious freedom, right? They always like to talk about it in the news because it sounds like a very liberal value that was a success for religious freedom. Okay. But the point is that, that's one way of saying it. They weren't doing it for political reasons. But the point is they thanked God that now they could serve Him. They were thanking God that now they can keep the Sabbath and rededicate the temple and study Torah and do circumcision. So they were thanking God and they were happy to do the commandments. That's also a key fundamental in Jewish thinking, is our main happiness is to do the commandments. So it's counterintuitive, and obviously it's very different than I'm no expert, but the Pauline idea that the commandments is a burden and something that someone can't do, that in Judaism is just the opposite. It's something we're happy over, something we rejoice over, and it's something that we believe we can accomplish, and we know we can accomplish because God doesn't command us to do something we can't do. But you could say more than that. I think the idea of being joyous with it, because there isn't any place that a Jew is more at home. There isn't a place that a Jew feels more with his father than, so to speak, with God his Father than when he performs the commandments and studies Torah. Now, this applies to the non-Jew and their 7 commandments. When the non-Jew fulfills their 7 commandments, a commandment is a way to be intimate with God. That's what a commandment is, because when the king commands you, that creates a relationship. He's so beyond and so above. Or when the king directs his subjects to do something, that creates a relationship. I could say it differently. The very kingship creates a relationship. But what does a king do? He issues decrees, right? For the benefit of the nation. And so too does God. So just like we say in the prayers every night, that we rejoice in the words of your Torah, this is something that a person should strive for, that Torah study should be done with joy, happiness, and with appreciation. And how do you come there? To appreciate it, that it's God's word, and according to Hasidic thinking, it's even more than that. Literally, God put himself in the Torah. So it's a deep intimacy when a person studies Torah. God is communicating directly with man, with the person, but even deeper, it's God's heart. God put his heart into this. It's like a parent giving instructions to their children. It's not just, so it's not just a king. It's like a parent. When a parent gives their children counsel and advice, it's coming from the heart. They want to see them follow it because they want to see them succeed in life. They want to see them go on a good path. And they're hoping, they're praying that they'll follow their good advice that they learned over so many difficult years of life, right? And so you have to look at the Torah in the same way. The Torah is like a divine counsel coming from God's inner self that he wants out of love for us to follow. And so that's the idea of Hanukkah. We see this idea very deeply, that we're rejoicing that we can keep the commandments. It's a very uniquely Jewish thing. Okay, any questions about any of this so far? So, yeah, there's particularly a mitzvah, there's a commandment on, or it's part of the holiday of Hanukkah, to sing praises to God when you light the candles, buy meals. So this is the whole theme of the holiday. Also, I think it shows you how a Jew, and I guess you have to think about it, and Ben Noach is obviously permitted to also connect to these things, but is supposed to connect to his history. Like, you're supposed to feel like it's you. You're going through it. I mean, you can't be happy about something that has no relation to yourself. You're supposed to feel like this is something that we went through, this just happened yesterday. It's not an easy thing to accomplish, but at least to appreciate that if this wouldn't have happened so many years ago, I wouldn't have the gifts that I have now. Right? And I guess, you know what? Actually, I've thought about that many times, and maybe you've thought about it too, but if not for Hanukkah, there would be no Western civilization. Right? Because God forbid, if Judaism would have been abolished, there would have been no Judeo-Christian values, nothing. Never would have happened. Jewish values would not have been spread over the world because, God forbid, there would have been, it would have been crushed. And, I mean, although there was Jews in the diaspora at the time of this, but I don't know exactly the situation with that during the time. There were some Jews, but the fact of the matter is, Judaism was centered around the temple and was centered around the settlement in Israel. So, and the commonwealth that existed in Israel at the time, when, after the Babylonian exile. And if that would have been destroyed, or that would have been fully assimilated, it could have, God forbid, meant the end of authentic Judaism. So this is really a celebration for the whole world. If not for this event, if not for this miracle that God saved the Israel and the Judeans, that they should be able to continue practice. And not only that, after this, there was a renaissance. All the Mishnah and Talmud, everything developed after this period, after this victory. So none of that would have, who knows what would have happened, right? There wouldn't have been, there definitely, God forbid, if they would have succeeded in subduing the pious Jews who were fighting for Judaism, then we would be, God forbid, impoverished from all this. So this is really a holiday for everybody. I think it's really a big holiday for all peoples, I think. In a very strange way, Xmas is a celebration of Hanukkah. I don't mean that literally, but the point is that, like I said, Christianity only existed because of Hanukkah. It only came about because of Hanukkah. If there would have been no Hanukkah, there would have been no Christianity. Although, anyway, I don't want to get too much into that, but let's leave it at that. So there's other interesting point. There's so many, but Joseph sends a message to his father in order to confirm with his father that his father should understand that it is actually he who is sitting on the viceroy throne of Egypt, right? And he sends his father gifts. He sends his father a wagon filled with different materials and things like food, grain, bread. But Rashi comments, according to the, and it says, Rashi comments because of the end of the verse, is what I'm saying. The end of the verse says, and that Jacob, his soul was refreshed, and he came to life when he saw these wagons. So the question is, what's the big thing about the wagons? Like, what did that mean? So, it could be the simple meaning is that, there was so much there that he must have been a very wealthy person was sending from it. So he understood that Joseph really was a viceroy. He was a royalty. That was probably the simple explanation. But that's kind of lacking. It doesn't seem to be enough. Like, it doesn't really explain why Jacob became so fully consoled and joyous and knew that Joseph was alive. And also, there's a connotation in those words that says that his soul was revived, that he also regained the Holy Spirit, divine cognizance, which he had lost during the years of his depression, I shouldn't say depression, but during the years of his sadness and mourning. Jacob did not have, the divine presence did not rest on Jacob during those years. Because the divine presence only rests in a place where there is happiness. Again, based on the idea of faith and so on, and a person should be happy and calm. If a person feels distraught and unhappy, a person could be a righteous person, but the divine presence doesn't rest there. Okay. So the point is this. So Rashi brings a fascinating idea. He says that the wagons were actually a hint. He sent wagons as a hint to Jacob. To hint to him, it was a play on words. The word for a wagon in Hebrew is agala. That means wagon. And then the word for a calf is egla. So it's very similar. It's the same letters, different pronunciation. So he was hinting to his father that the last Torah topic that they studied together, because they were very close students, and Joseph was Jacob's most prized student. So he was hinting to his father that before they had become separated, the last topic that they studied together was the topic of the calf that is beheaded due to the broken naked calf, due to the unknown when there's a murder victim that is unknown. Okay, that's a long explanation. We have to get into the details for those who don't know. Okay, so in Deuteronomy, it discusses that if we find a dead body, we find a corpse in between two cities, in the wilderness, on the road, right? Not in the city, but outside, on the road, on the highway, so to speak. They used to call it the highwaymen, right? The robbers were highwaymen. So he was found on the highway. He's found on the roads, some remote spots, whatever it may be. So you have to measure. The elders of both closest cities come out and measure. Is he closer to this city? Is he closer to the other city? And they figure out which city it's closer to. And then you got to call the priests, and the Sanhedrin has to come down, the high court, and the priests do a ceremony in which a young calf is taken and it's killed, and the blood is spilled there. And they put their hands on the animal, and they say, "We don't spill this blood." The sages, the elders of the city, and I think maybe the sages have to say, "We do not spill this blood." And then the priests have to bless the nation. And then the verse finishes off, and you have to make sure to vindicate this victim. And if you can still find the murderer, you have to bring justice if you can. But anyway, this is the discussion. And you have to take vengeance on behalf of this innocent blood. So that's the end of the verse. But the point is that Joseph was telling his father, this was what we were discussing. This was the last point that was going on. And I guess the question is, what's the significance? Is there some significance here? Is there some lesson? I mean, the simple explanation is he was just telling him a secret that only the two of them knew. And so this way he knows it's him. But is there something more profound here going on? Well, one thing I was thinking, I think really jumps out at you, is if you think again about Joseph's worldview, and you think about this law, this mitzvah, you realize that there's this mitzvah that propelled Joseph to be the kind of person that he was. Meaning to say what? Collective responsibility. He saw himself responsible. If there's any way, if he passed through a situation, he had to care. He couldn't just say, none of my business. He learned from these laws that we are responsible, even for a stranger, and that if we're in a place of authority, we are responsible. Our sages say that the reason that the elders have to ask for forgiveness, even though they didn't murder this person, it says because maybe they didn't pray for him on his way out. Maybe they didn't give him enough supplies. Maybe they didn't direct him properly. Right? So what does this mean? This means they have to be responsible. They're responsible even for strangers who come into their cities and are coming from place to place. Often people who were doing that alone were poor. Right? Usually people who are doing well, they're going back and forth with family in a group. They're not alone where they could be susceptible for being highwayed, laywayed. It's usually people who are down and out, who are poor, who are down on their circumstances, that they're alone. Right? Not always, but generally. And so even for such a person, all these great dignitaries have to come out and ask for forgiveness. So this taught Joseph this lesson. He said, it's because of your lesson that I became the viceroy of Egypt. Right? It's because of this lesson that Joseph cared. He cared about the ministers who had the dreams in the prison. He's cared about the minister of wine and the minister and the baker, the butler and the baker, as they usually call it. He cared. He saw that they were terribly distraught, and he asked them what's wrong, and he tried to help. Right? When Pharaoh took him out, he had no idea if Pharaoh was going to give him any reward. He just helped. He had the knowledge, and he imparted it. By the way, as a side note, in the dreams that Joseph interpreted for Pharaoh, there's a famous question. The question goes as follows. Joseph interpreted the dreams correctly. There was one dream that was about fat cows and thin cows. There's another dream about fat, so to speak, rich grain stalks and weather-beaten, sickly stalks. And he explained that they meant 7 years of plenty, 7 years of famine. And then he goes on to say, and Pharaoh should pick a man who can know how to deal with this and collect all the grain and everything. Why did he do that? Why did he wasn't asked for this advice. Isn't he overstepping? So I thought of an answer. So one of the details of the dream was that the thin cows would eat the fat cows, and you wouldn't even see the fat cows ever existed, right? Similarly, that the beaten down stalks devoured the healthy stalks like they never existed. So Rashi points out that this was an allusion to the fact that after the years of plenty, when the years of famine would come, the years of plenty would be completely forgotten, like they never happened. So Joseph understood from this was trying to tell Pharaoh something. What's it trying to tell him? It's trying to tell him there's going to be nothing left. That they'll be completely forgotten, meaning no grain will survive. If you don't do something about it, there'll be nothing that will remain from those earlier years left in the storehouses. You have to intentionally do something to make sure that it exists. And that's what the dream was telling him, this extra point, to stimulate them to do something. In other words, the story was, there's going to be, the full story was 7 years of plenty, 7 years of famine, nothing will remain from the 7 years of plenty. That's terrible. You got to do something about that. So, in other words, the dream implied that a solution had to be found. It's not that it gave the exact solution, but it implied that you have to take action to store, because if you don't do something to store it, there won't be anything left. Everyone will eat it all. Because they think it goes on, plenty goes on forever, and they'll eat or whatever, or they won't take care of it properly because it seems like there's such an abundance. And so you have to store it properly. Anyway, so that's the thought I had. Okay, so listen, this is such an important point. We're finishing with this point. That 2 points. First of all, we're all responsible for the others around us, but there aren't any that are more responsible than those with authority and those that have the power to do something. Then they have to do something. And you were asking, James, about Mashiach. That is what Mashiach is going to be like. Mashiach, when Mashiach comes, is going to be, we're going to see leadership that we haven't seen in a long time. We're going to see leadership that really rights wrongs in a deep way, and is not tainted by self-interest. And that's part of the messianic phenomenon. It says that he's going to judge people by smell, to be able to judge. What that exactly means, we don't really know. Could be that through mystical, spiritual powers he'll judge. Or it means that he'll be so sensitive to all the nuances of human personalities that it'll seem like he can just smell and know who's right and wrong. I don't know. hopefully we'll live to see, we'll find out. But the point is, again, in Judaism, judgment is important. Judging fairly, because it's through judging that we can vindicate people who've been wronged, right? People who have been wronged in some way, they can come to court and ask for a vindication, ask for a relief, as we call it in the law. We can come and ask for help, but we have to be treated properly. And if the law doesn't encompass that area, then leadership has to try to find some way to assist them anyway, in some kind of a way. So, at least to pray for them, like in this story about the calf, is at least to pray on behalf of this person and to show them that you care, and make sure that they have the proper, supplies for the road. He shouldn't go out. Nobody cares what's going on with him. So that's very key. They say, interestingly enough, in Israeli culture, there's a tendency towards that. We should all learn from that. Maybe, I think in small towns you find that also more people know each other, people more interested in each other. So it's a very, very good thing. We have to care about our neighbors in a good way, not in the wrong way. Not by looking outside. What are they doing wrong now? Did they cross my property line? Look at that ugly garden he has. He didn't do his lawn yesterday. I'll show him. No. Instead of looking like that, to look and see what's wrong. Is there anything I can do? So, so that's the lesson from this mitzvah, and that's what Joseph took from it, in which led his life until he ended up eventually filling this great position. You could say that, maybe that also even led to his understanding of the dream. It could have been just a divine inspiration, but was there more to it? Meaning to say, because this is the way Joseph thought. Joseph thought about, the society, what was going on, while the other ministers were just thinking about Pharaoh. You're going to have 7 daughters, and then they're going to have 7 daughters will pass away. It's all about Pharaoh's little soap opera life, but nothing about the rest of the country. And Joseph was thinking bigger. He was looking at Pharaoh like he looked at himself. You are an emissary of God. You're here to be a trustee of the people. And I don't know if Pharaoh ever heard that before from anyone. I don't know if he saw himself that way, or if he did, but he wasn't spoken to in those terms. Anyway, it's a lot to speculate about. Very often kings, there's one of the big interests as a king is staying a king, staying not dead, making sure your sons are king. In other words, retaining power, gaining more power, but not thinking about how do I take care of my subjects properly. And so that was how Joseph opened up Pharaoh's mind to a different type of leadership. Leadership that wasn't about exploitation, but was about what? Responsibility.